Congressman, great to have you on the show, as always.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Hearings today, and you made some very important points, I thought. You listed a number of things that you can't opt out of, like our Miranda rights.
Right.
And you asked, why isn't there a national standard for our Second Amendment?
Right.
Tell us about why you feel it's so important.
Well, I mean, look, I'm a big states' rights guy, but as I read the Constitution, the 9th and 10th Amendments allow the states to involve themselves in areas where the first 8 amendments have not already spoken. Once you accept the fact that the first 8 amendments apply to the states through what's called the doctrine of incorporation, which most people accept that, we would never tolerate different standards for the First Amendment. You don't have 50 different Miranda versions. You don't have 50 different ideas on whether or not you have to provide counsel to indigent defendants who are facing prison time. So this notion that states can do what they want with the Second Amendment, if it is a fundamental right, which the professor agreed that it is, and you apply the highest level of constitutional scrutiny, which is strict scrutiny, then the Second Amendment needs to be afforded the same measure of respect as the other amendments. And that's kind of what I was driving at with my questions.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Mr. Quigley.
Yes. I mean, that's look, he's a decent enough guy, but here's the difference. He said those of us who support states' rights kind of pick and choose which issues. Actually, the Constitution did it for us. So it's not us doing it. Mm-hmm. If the Constitution specifically gives a right to Congress, then that's not a right for the states. And when the Constitution, once you accept the fact that the Second Amendment applies to the states, then, South Carolina, Nevada, Utah can't have a different version of the Second Amendment.
Yep. So
it's really not a states' rights issue. It's how you read the Constitution. And if there's an individual right to bear arms that is in the Constitution and applies to all 50 states, then it's not a states' rights issue.
I thought it was very interesting because the opposition, Mayor Bloomberg and his coalition and the Brady campaign, they're always arguing about national reciprocity and how it's going to put more guns into criminals' hands. And again, you were asking Joyce Lee Malcolm, a law professor at George Mason University, about the crime rate among concealed permit holders. And she pretty much laid it on the line.
Obviously, it's less, and
right.
I do have respect for the police commissioner. I'm a former prosecutor. I love law enforcement. And I've actually lived through the death of a police officer who was on duty at the time in Spartanburg. But the reality is, despite the episodes, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle love to argue by anecdote. They want to find one example out of 2,000 plus years of recorded history, and then argue by analogy and anecdote that we need to change everything because we got one bad result.
Mm-hmm. And the commissioner did do that.
Well,
he cited an incident, but he said it doesn't usually happen that way.
Well, of course it doesn't.
Yeah.
You're far more likely to be harmed by somebody who hasn't gone through the process of getting a concealed weapons permit. I mean, the notion that more gun laws are going to stop people, 922G is not going to stop somebody who's hell-bent on getting a gun and shooting someone.
Yeah, and I thought your answer to Joyce Lee Malcolm, your response was, amen on that, because she laid that right out. She said there isn't a criminal who's going to take the time to register his firearm.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
It's a fact. I saw it for 16 years as a prosecutor. So, the notion that we need more laws has been debunked both statistically and anecdotally, to be honest.
And you look at all the states who have concealed carry, and it hasn't been a problem. And with all respect, as you said to the commissioner, it was interesting because on the issue of deterrency, he came out and he says, he's concerned that it would make an offender use his firearm quicker if he saw the person he was holding up reaching for a gun. Then he says, he can't say whether carrying concealed makes a difference or it doesn't. Well, we sure can tell from our armed citizen stories, it makes a difference.
Well, with respect to the commissioner, look, that's also why I started off asking whether or not there's a constitutional right to self-defense. The self-defense law is essentially the same in all 50 states. You can use the amount of force that is necessary to repel the danger. So if somebody comes at you with a spitball, no, you can't respond with a bazooka. But you also don't have to sit around and try to figure out the caliber of the weapon that the other side uses, if you reasonably believe that your life is in imminent danger, and a reasonable person would respond the same way, and lay aside the difference of a duty to retreat, whether you're in your home or not in your home. The states, for the most part, have the same self-defense law. We don't have to sit around and wait to see if the gun's loaded or wait to see if the knife is going to be thrown at us. We have self-defense laws, and I think self-defense is rooted in the Constitution, just like the right to travel and just like the right to bear arms.
Yep. So when you see this hearing today and you look down the road, will you think this is going to become law, this reciprocity?
Well, I don't think anything's going to become law when we have the Senate we currently have.
Mm-hmm.
Will it pass the House? I suspect it probably will, but it's not going to pass the Senate. It's not going to be signed into law by the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah, it's a tough fight, and it's been a tough fight for a lot of years.
Well, I think right now we're just playing defense, and thank goodness Justice Scalia wrote a thorough, beautifully written exegesis on the origins of the Second Amendment and what it means. And anybody who hasn't read his opinion in Heller really should, as much for the history as for the law.